Great. Welcome everyone to another localized event. My name is Michelle. I'm the events and community manager. I'm joining from Mexico City and I'm Mexican. I was just sharing that with the group before we started the session. We always like to know where people are joining from because we're a pretty diverse group. And if you're new to the community, we're so happy to have you here. Or if you're coming back, we're also super happy to have you here for another time. At Localize, if you are new, Localize, we are a global platform and community where we connect students and recent graduates from emerging markets. So the regions of Latin America, Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, I think I already mentioned that, and Southeast Asia mainly, but we welcome people from all over the world. So we connect you guys to job opportunities and career resources. And when we say career resources, we also include experts who come to here every week to guide you in a variety of topics, of industries, to help you decide on what steps you need to take or what industry you would like to work in. So they are here to basically guide you and help you on any questions you might have about your career and the next steps you want to take. It doesn't matter if you're still in college or if you are already working, all the questions are valid. So with that, we are going to start with the session. And as you might know, today we're gonna be talking about careers in product management, how to start a career in that, and what is even product management for all of us who might be new to this topic. And we are here today with Nurhan Shaban. She's our expert today. She's a senior product manager at Noom, but she has also previously worked with companies such as Google, Udacity, and even supported US majors on the COVID response at the Consultancy Delivery Associates, which is like a social impact consulting. She will tell us more about like all of these experiences, her current role, but she's also, as a background, she's an Egyptian and she always tried to stay connected to the Middle East. She has consulted with many organizations, mainly in the topic of product, such as Smart Medical Services in Egypt, Libyan Digital Health Startup Spitar, and Egypt First FinTech BC Disrupt Ventures, and another UAE-based fintech called MamoPay. So I'm gonna stop there. Well, she has her master's degree at Harvard, just another the last fact. I'm gonna stop there because I want to hear, and we all want to hear that from you, Nurhan, all your journey and how did you basically end up where you currently are. So yeah, welcome. And I would like to start the conversation with that. Like, can you maybe introduce a little bit about yourself and how did you land where you currently are? Like, how did you end up at Noom?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this intro. I always love coming here, and I think part of why I love coming here is it's such a diverse group, and I feel like it's such a rare opportunity to be able to connect people from emerging markets globally in this way. So I love localized. I always say yes whenever there's something that's localized related, and I'm glad you all know about this community because it's pretty awesome. And I'm a huge fan of the founder and the CEO. So I think that's about localized. I think about me, I mean, my name is Nurhan. So hi, everyone. I am Egyptian, and I see a bunch of Egyptians and people from the Middle East in the audience, which makes me very excited, but I'm also excited for everyone who's here. And I grew up in Egypt, sort of like in many Egyptian families, right? Your parents think you're successful if you become a doctor or an engineer. I was doing well in school. I think my brain functioned in a way that made me do well in school. And so I think the path for me was sort of like, hey, maybe you can become a doctor, right? Because it's very prestigious. If there's one thing that I knew in life, I knew that I did not want to become a doctor. I was scared of blood. That's like one thing that I knew very strongly that I didn't want to do, and that I was more excited about people. I think I was more excited about economics. I was more excited about social impact and policies that could impact people. And so I think I was trying to figure out, given my interest in people, what could I study? What could I learn? What could I do with my life? And when I was in high school, I was very fortunate to be connected to some organizations and nonprofits in Egypt and to meet people who said, you're very smart, maybe you would consider applying to universities in the US. And my family could not afford it, of course, at least for me. And so for me, the question was, okay, if that's an option, can I fund it and can I get a scholarship? So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, and I think for those of you in the audience who are interested in this, please feel free to reach out. Just figure out, okay, if I want to study abroad and I want to expand my opportunities, what would that look like? So I ended up getting a full scholarship from Harvard and flying to the US back in 2011. And it was hard, but I also loved it because I think it opened my mind to the idea of like taking so many classes about different things and like this idea of liberal arts. And I think going back into product management now in hindsight, I realize how helpful that was. But at the time, I think I was just taking things I was interested in. So I was interested in people and I took psychology. I was interested in society and I took economics courses. I was interested in philosophy actually. So I took a bunch of classes. I just like tried to figure out what am I interested in because it was such a unique opportunity to be able to explore this. And in addition to all my classes, because I had no idea what I wanted to do, I tried to explore. So I did an internship with a startup at the time. I did another where I was doing like operational things, and it got me just some exposure into the startup world. So that was one thing that I did. I did a lot of research with professors, and it made me realize that maybe I don't want to do a PhD. And it was also really helpful, some of the skills that I've gained. I worked and I did some sales, and it made me realize that I'm not great at sales and that I couldn't sell anything, and that it was something that I had to work on. Maybe not something I want to do in my career, but a skill that I wanted to improve. So I would say I tried to use my undergraduate time to like explore different things, and I would encourage maybe some of the students in the audience to, do a similar thing. And then by the time I graduated, I knew I didn't want to do a PhD. I knew that I was still interested in people and in social impact. And I was then trying to figure out, okay, given my interest, and I knew that I liked staying engaged and working with different people and different things. The question for me, okay, is like, what is a career for this? So I had a lot of career conversations with people who did consulting, people who did international development, and some people in tech. And I think over time, I started feeling more and more curious about tech. It felt very scalable, very impactful, tons of opportunities, very interesting, like my work. And so I decided, okay, maybe there is something, maybe I can see myself in tech, because I think it was hard because I was not a computer science major. I was not like the typical tech person. And so it took me a while to realize that their tech is really human. And if someone is interested in people and interested in systems and interested in change, there is a ton of space for that person within the tech industry. So then, yeah, I started applying for jobs, and I ended up getting my first job at Google. It was in operations, and I knew at the time that as I did this job and got more experience, that I was more excited about building things and that I wanted to make that pivot to product management. And then I feel like the rest has been maybe the easier part. The early part is the harder part, just like figuring out what I wanted.
I mean, everything was, thank you for sharing. Like the whole journey is amazing. I personally, so Nurhan has been an expert with us for, I want to say a couple of years now. And she has been part of the community, guiding you guys, guiding students in our community. But I personally, it's the first time I have the honor to moderate a session for her. And I personally didn't know about your, like the beginning of your story or your journey from like applying to a scholarship, coming from Egypt and like getting the scholarship to study in another country, which is the US. So I feel like that part is like really, really inspiring, and like it really connects with that's something, not only the US, but that's something that a lot of members from our community are always looking for, whether it's like studying or like getting a job in another country or in their own countries, but like for global companies. So that was, thank you for sharing that. And also I think you mentioned something really, really important, that it's always scary for many of us here. When we hear tech, we just imagine roles related to building maybe the product, not to working with the ones who build the product. So we just think about like data scientists, or we think about like software engineers, but there's people working with the teams, or like even testing the products to see if it's going to be user friendly, or how the user is going to react. So there's like plenty and options. So thank you for sharing that tech is not only for like software engineers. So if there's anyone here listening to this talk about product management and you're not in tech or in engineering, don't worry, there's like tons of role, marketing, sales, like anything you can imagine.
Absolutely. Marketing, sales, legal, operations, quality, there's everything, right? Because we're building things for people end to end. And so we have to have people who are imagining it and building it and making sure it works right and thinking about the implications. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I would like to ask you now, before going deep into like what is product management, what is your daily, like your day-to-day look like? And I guess it's related to like your role. So how is it like, what is the day-to-day look like for you as a product manager in Noom currently? Like what do you actually do? Yeah, just give us an image of what it can look like.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would start by saying that part of why I love product management is it's really diverse. And so my day, I get to do a lot of different things in my day and I get to do different things every day. And it differs given where we are in the stage of, a launch, for example, of a product. Um, so I think examples of this might include really trying to figure out if our users are having any issues. So doing some research. Maybe I would interview a user. That's something that I do every week, for example, just so I can learn more about what they like, what they don't like, what's going well, so that I have this user empathy. And I feel like I try to lean into my psychology, skill set for that piece and really the user empathy piece, regardless of what a person may have studied. I do a lot of market research, so really understanding, who out there is in the market, what can I read so I can stay on top of trends and understand what's going on, um, or what are competitors doing and what can I learn from them and what can I glean. So I think I do spend a lot of time listening and reading and diving into data. So that could also mean diving into customer data to understand, we're seeing an increase in this or we're seeing a drop here. What can we do about it? So that's definitely part of my piece, understanding. Another part of my piece is figuring out what we want to do next. So maybe creating a strategy, maybe communicating that strategy to my team and getting feedback and saying, hey, like, what do you all think of this? Here is how I think we could win this specific thing. What are your thoughts? And translating this into a roadmap. Like, here's what we're doing this month. Here's what we're doing maybe over next quarter. Here's what we want to validate so that we can figure out if we should do this or not do this. So that's definitely also part of what I do. I would say maybe dreaming about the future and envisioning it and then going from like a year from now, where do we want to be? And then, okay, if we want to be there, what would it take for us to get there? That's definitely part of my job. I would say a part of my job is also working with designers and engineers. If I have an idea, like you're all writing, or like writing on chat right now, for example, on Zoom, someone designed it. Like, here's how it's going to look like. Here's the color. Here's where it would be displayed. Here's how we can think about how users can see it and can use it. So I spend a lot of my time just with my designer, thinking about things and giving like each other feedback and designing. I spend a lot of time also with my engineers figuring out, okay, can we build this? Is it actually easy to build? If not, how long is it going to take? Is it feasible? Do we have the resources for it? So that's also part of my day. Legal team, like if we do this, are there any legal risks? What should I think about, as I maybe launch this feature? Let's say I built something. I spend a lot of time just figuring out, did it work? How do I dive into the data to make sure this worked? If it didn't work, what did I learn from it? And so I feel like it really depends and it's really diverse. And some people get overwhelmed by this. I feel very energized by feeling like I can use my brain for different things and interact with different people and learn from different people. And at the end of the day, as a PM, I am the one responsible for like pushing, like making sure everything is working. And so I'm sort of I see myself as a catalyst, like um, really making sure that I'm the glue to the team and that I am delivering value to the customer and to the user and sorry, to the business.
That sounds like a really, really exciting role. Like, because you get to like work with like people in all areas, whoever is designing for the user, whoever is actually building the tech for whatever the product is, thinking like what can work and what cannot for whoever is gonna use it. That sounds like a really, really exciting role. So if you could, I guess the follow-up question will be, you already gave us like a really great idea of what a product manager does in their daily like life. But what is actually product management? Like, how would you describe it?
How would I describe it? I would say maybe I can ask the audience like what is their favorite product? So people maybe can type in the chat or a product you've used yesterday or today, right? So I would um I'd love for people to maybe share some thoughts about a product they've used or they like. Michelle, what's one of your favorite products?
Oh my God. That's you just like bring it back to me. Oh, someone says Airbnb.
Yeah.
My favorite product. Oh my God. It's so hard to think about a product. I guess it can be as simple as the water bottle that I have is not my favorite product, but it's just as simple as the water bottle that I have in front of me. So like even like the like like the fingerprints. It's not my favorite. I'm just thinking about the products that I've been using today. Like the fingerprint signing you use to like get into a place.
Yeah.
Like I was just thinking today I used it for the gym, but like who even design or thought about that.
Yeah, I think that's product management. I think there hopefully there was someone who was very thoughtful and tried to think about how do we make sure you mentioned the water bottle. That's a product, right? It's not tech, but it's a product. How do we make sure that it's a product that delivers value for the company that's producing the bottle and for you? Like how do we get you to like how it looks so you can maybe buy it? And how do we get you to drink more water, and how do we get you to have an emotional attachment to that water bottle, and is this water bottle for you when you hike, or is this a water bottle that you want to take when like put on your desk when you're working? Like there are so many decisions that you might think of when you're thinking about even designing a water bottle. Designing a water bottle for someone who's like elderly might be different than designing it for a child. So are we designing like a smaller one for a child? How old are they? So I would say the PM is the one who's thinking about all of this, like who am I designing this for? What do they need? Why am I even designing a water bottle in the first place? Should it be a water bottle or should it be something else? Why should I spend my time on this? And like, where's the opportunity? You know, what's happening in the water bottle market? And like, how can I offer something that's unique and differentiated? So to me, that's what a PM is. Making sure that you as a user love the product and like are getting value out of it, and making sure that the company is also able to stay sustainable and drive growth from whatever product it is.
Yeah, that's amazing. That was an amazing explanation. Thank you. And just to not like we're checking the chat. So some of the products, if in case you have like any input on that, some of the products that people are sharing was from Airbnb, which is an app, to even a coffee mug, Grammarly, which I don't know why I didn't thought about that. I love Grammarly as a non English native. It's really really helpful. Someone said iCloud sharing. They're saying because it's so seamless. The Apple ecosystem, espresso machine, um, and digitally. Someone else also share Airbnb. So I don't know if you have like any other like input or like ideas around these products that people are sharing.
No, I love that there is, as you can see, there's a diversity of products out there. So if you're a PM, you could get to work on something that's consumer facing, like Airbnb. It's you. We can also imagine something like Airbnb. You could be the person thinking about guests who are booking Airbnb, but you could also be thinking about hosts. How can you convince people to rent out their space, and what does that experience look like? And so Airbnb is a really interesting example because for you to book a place, someone will have had to like put that place on Airbnb, and you have to think about
Right.
that experience look like holistically. A coffee mug is more of a physical product, so it's different, but it's still a product, and there must have been a PM who's thinking about it. So as you can see, I think the diversity of products in the world also reflects the diversity within product management. Some people are interested more in like consumer facing things. Some people are more interested in enterprise products. Some people are interested in, physical things and hardware. Some people are interested in trying out different things throughout their career. So I would say just reflects the diversity of what a PM can do depending on what the product is.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And I guess like the follow-up question is, it sounds like a product manager is like a really complete and complex, not meaning difficult, but like that it entails a lot of like different like skills and areas that you work with. So my follow-up question will be, what are some of the skills, and it can be hard or like soft skills or both, that you need to actually be a successful product manager?
I would say a couple, in my opinion, at least a couple of things. One is curiosity, because you get to work with so many different people, and some people love just, I want to do one thing, I want to dive really, really deep, and I don't want to have to interact with a ton of people and get curious about different things. So I feel like people who do well as a PM tend to be really curious. I think the other piece is they tend to enjoy collaborating with others because you will collaborate with other people. You have to, and you're not their manager or anything. You have to influence them by providing data and context and making sure they understand why you're sharing what you're sharing and like open to their feedback. And so I feel like collaboration is a big piece. And I know people who say, I don't want to talk to anyone. I'd rather just like dive deep and do my own thing. And I think that's not really that's great. There are options for that. There are other career options. But I think in my mind, PMs are again the glue to the team, and you work with so many different stakeholders. So collaboration is really important. Communication is really important. So if you have the opportunity to take writing classes or just any opportunity to practice your either verbal or written communication. Noom is a very writing heavy culture. And so I write a lot of documents. And part of it is to explain, like, here's what we're doing. Here are the goals. Here are the metrics we want to move. Here are the problems we want to solve. And so I feel like I'm leaning into some of the writing skills that I've learned in college and some of the writing classes. At the time, I wasn't sure I was taking them, but I think now in hindsight, I'm glad that I do consider myself, somewhat of a good writer. And I found that to be very helpful. I would say being data driven, like I've taken a bunch of statistics courses, and again, I feel like I'm constantly using what I learned in stats courses to think quantitatively and deeply about issues. So how might I segment users? How can I look at data for younger audience versus older audience? How might I look at data by region? Like, so I think that's not to say you have to be like a statistician or anything like that. I think it's just at the very least some data fluency and ability to break things down analytically. So I think analytical skills are very important. I think, in my opinion, these are like from a mindset perspective and a skills perspective, the most important things.
And how, for example, were there like some more direct skills like writing, you can take courses, or you practice that in a lot of courses, no matter what you're studying in college, for example. Data, maybe you can take like also some courses, but I'm curious about like, for example, how can a college student develop skills such as curiosity? Is there any tips you have like to develop those type of skills that are not so um like directly translated into something tangible that you can take a course in?
Yeah, I think curiosity as it relates to product management might mean taking a course on product management. So for example, before I became a PM, I was like, I'm hearing these PMs say all these things and I don't know what it means. Can I take a class and do
Right.
a project, right? So I took a class on Udemy at the time on product management. And that class, I think it was taught by two PMs, and it was amazing because they really walk into different parts of the PM journey. What does it look like to do research? What does it look like to critique a product? And I think I was able to use some of these skills and some of the questions that they shared in the course. One, to really sharpen my interview skills because I had no PM skills and I needed to interview and use at least, speak in a way that made it sound like I know what I was talking about and say, I've taken this course and I've tried this. So I think that is one way to demonstrate curiosity. I would say your curiosity might mean having conversations with different people who are in product, and therefore you're using your curiosity and demonstrating it in the interview by saying, I've read about the company and I've read about your competitors and I learned this and I had conversation with this, because you're then practicing curiosity and also seeing if you're actually curious about it and if you're interested, and also
Right.
demonstrating. I think another thing is there are so many, we all use products every day. Um, you might want to write about it online if you're the kind of person who enjoys writing about it. Maybe you want to identify ways to, improve a product, or you might find a freelancing gig online that you could do, especially if you're trying to break in so that you get to say, I've done a project, here's what it looked like. Or you might, get curious about an internship and create a role for yourself or find something where you can delve deeper. So I would say to the extent possible, being in PM communities, reading from people who are, plugged into it. So there are a lot of newsletters out there. And if you can, doing a hands-on project, and there are so many online courses out there that are affordable that you can take that can teach you so much, and where you can actually do a hands-on project at the end. Coursera has one, Udacity has one, Udemy have one.
Amazing. Thank you. And I guess just to adding to that, in Localize, we don't have courses, but we have a bunch of content about product, about like any industry you can think about. But like regarding product, we have had different experts, which is valuable because you can go back and watch the recordings of the sessions, and every time you will find things different. So for example, if you're more interested in like a tech company to like start your product career in a tech company, you might watch this session or another expert session working in that. There's other, maybe if you're interested in health, there's an expert who worked in health in a product manager role. So if you go back and check all of the different like industries the expert have worked in, maybe you can find which is like the industry or sector you're more interested in. So maybe that's another way to discover out of curiosity, which is the area that you would like to start in.
Yeah, I love that. And I would say one more thing that this made me think of that I see people do often, which demonstrates curiosity, is there are people who work at my company who are maybe not even a PM, and they come and say, hey, mind if I shadow you? Do you mind if I do like a 10%
That's
project? How
great.
can I help? And it's a great way to learn. It's not, it's not too much for me because the fact that they shadow me, they're helping me with something, and they get to see what it looks like, and I get to see that they're actually curious and interested. And then maybe if there's an opportunity, you can create one. So I would say, especially if you have PMs at your company, like go talk to them, shadow them, do a project with them. That will really help you understand if you like it, and also demonstrate curiosity and maybe open, an opportunity for you.
That's a great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And my next question, well, before I go to the next question, just an invite for everyone to, we're approaching the half of the session. So pretty soon we're gonna start taking questions from you. So if you have like any question about Nurhan's career, about anything that we have talked to, or even about your own career, if you have an interview coming up, if you're interested about a specific role, anything is valid. So send your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we will make sure to answer them all. Okay, so my next question is, how does a career in product management looks like at a junior level? So let's say you just graduating from college, you get your first product management related role. You might not be the manager, but you might be working with a manager in product. So how does that look like right after college? So for example, or at a junior level?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think it can look like different things. So one, there are some companies out there who have an associate PM position. So they have programs or they have levels that allow people who are entry level to come in. And that's great. If you have this opportunity, that's amazing, good for you. There are scarce and very competitive. They are there though, and I would encourage everyone to try to do it. But I think if you don't feel discouraged. The majority of PMs are, I think the majority of PMs did not take that route, but that's definitely an option. And these tend to be more structured because they are designed for entry level. I think what I've seen is more of a common path is either more junior people going into something that is not product, but that's closer to product. So for example, a designer, and you get to work with the product manager a lot, and then you're kind of interested, and slowly you transition to become a PM, or someone who's in marketing who works with product management, or someone who's in data, or an engineer, or operations. Like I started actually in operations and policy. And then you get to work with product managers and you get to shadow them and you get to collaborate and demonstrate the skills and over time sort of transition either internally at the same company or externally at a different company once you've had some experience. So that's definitely an option. And then a third option is joining a very small startup where you know what working at a startup's like. You do everything, right? If they need a ton of help and there's more than willing if there's a problem to let you go ahead and solve it. And so whereas at larger companies, things tend to be a bit more rigid and there are processes and structures, there are opportunities, but it's still like it's a larger company. Smaller companies, it's more informal. Often you get to wear different hats. So I also know a lot of people who just started a very small company at any role And as the company grows, they get to work on interesting problems that are product driven or product focused, and then they transition to this. So I would say for a junior person, these are, the three options that I've seen. I've also seen people start their own companies, and that's your own way of also building a product. So I don't want to discourage that. That's also an option. So yeah, either you start at an associate PM role, you start with something else, get some skill, and then, transition. You build your own company, or you join a small startup where you can wear different hats. These are like different ways of breaking into product management.
Amazing. And now I'm curious to know, like, how different is it, like the same role, a product manager role, between different industries of type of companies. For example, from a startup to like working in Google to and it can be from your own experiences, or like maybe what you have seen in friends working in the same type of roles. But like, I mean, we already mentioned some of the companies you work with: Noom, Udacity, Google, Delivery Associates. How different is it to have a similar role between these different industries and type of companies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from my perspective, the way I think about it is industries are important, but I also think about stage of the company. So if your company, we call it like it doesn't have product market fit. If you're just starting out, you're trying to figure out what you want to build. You really don't have a product. Maybe you have a product, but like you're not quite sure people are going to use it. It's very small. You've received maybe seed funding. Um, this is a pre-product market fit company. And it tends to be really small. It's really scrappy. You're still trying to figure out, what are we even doing? Should we build water bottles? Is there a need for water bottle, right? So that is a specific kind of environment where you're figuring it out as a team. You're really small, you're very scrappy, you're working so many hours, you're like, may not have a ton of funding. Like the company, if you don't figure something out in the next, couple of years, the company may close. And so really you're just in this, I don't want to call it war, but like, how do we figure this out mentality? Then if the company has product market fit, so people are using your water bottles, they're buying your water bottles, you've maybe gotten some funding from an investor, and the company is more established, it gets more into the growth stage. So now that we've sold, 100 water bottles this year, how do we sell 150 the next year? How do we sell 200 the year after? How do we expand beyond water bottles? Maybe we want to start selling bottles that are not for water, for something else, or maybe we want to sell something else other than water bottles. So I think that's the stage where the company is growing, and it's very different. You know what you're doing, at least at a core, as a core product, and you're really trying to grow the company. And growth becomes very important. And you really have to think about, okay, what did we do last year? How do we grow as a company? How do we really double down on where we're good at? How do we identify new opportunities? And it's a very different mindset. And you've already had investors, so they have expectations about what the company should do. But it's still startup-y. It's still like it's bigger than the we don't know what we're doing. But it still feels very startup-y. There's a lot of growth. It could also be very challenging if the company's not growing and you're not selling water bottle, and then you're like, what? How is the company going to survive? How do we want to think about this, etc. So that's a different stage of company. So, and then, there's the larger companies. So these are companies that are public, maybe. Think about Google. Google is like very big, but yeah, these are companies that are more established. They are public companies. They have maybe more processes. They have more structure. There are more defined rules. Like there's a person who does everything. Like you have a legal person and you have people to rely on. That's very different than at a smaller company. So for example, at a very, very small company as a PM, I may not have user researchers. So I would have, because we don't have resources, so I will have to do the user research maybe myself. At Google, it's much more likely that there's a team that does user research and a team that does data and a team that does. So I have so much more resources, which can be really helpful because we're trying to solve a problem at a much larger scale, and I have all these resources. And it can also mean that if you're at a very small company, you get to wear so many hats because there is no researcher, so you do the research, and there's no marketer, so you do a bit of marketing. And there's no data scientist or designer, so sometimes I just do design. So I would say I find that it's more different by stage than it is by, for me at least, sector.
And a quick follow-up question. Is there any like stage of company you would recommend someone who is just graduating for a first job in product management, or it depends on like what they're looking for? It depends on the person.
I really think it depends on the person. I know some people who are really, really excited and curious to just dive into a startup and wear different hats, and they feel like they're young and they have the energy and
Mhm.
be a great opportunity. And I know people, for example, if they're looking for visa sponsorship, right? And larger companies tend to sponsor
Right.
visas, I would say, more so than smaller companies. And so when I graduated, from my perspective at least, one of the things I had to think about is, how am I going to get visa sponsorship because
Mm,
American. So I would say think about your status, visa, if there are any concerns, and then what would you enjoy? So talk to people from different companies. And yeah, and then see, I think, what's the right fit. I feel like for a fresh grad, though, the team is the most important than the manager. So like find a team you're excited
right.
about. And then for me at least, like you can start at small company and go to bigger companies later, start at a big company and go to smaller company later. I think it's either, from my perspective, could be fine if you have a good manager and a good team.
Right. Thank you. And I have so many more questions. I just want to make sure everyone is sending their questions. Okay, I see a couple of questions coming in. I'm gonna start taking them in about 3 minutes. I promise you guys, we're gonna go over all of the questions. I do have two more questions I would like to ask. So one is so you shared you are from Egypt. You started like you moved to the US, to a new country for like studies first, and then from there you started your professional career. So I'm curious to see if you have like any like tips for people who might be trying to land their first job either in a US based company. Again, it can be in the US or it can be in their own countries of origin, but it might be a company from the US. So is there like any tips or anything, or from your experience, anything they should start to think or about to prepare to like work in a global setup or in a US based company?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I do have some thoughts, and that's my own experience. So, one, if you are someone who studied in the US and you're not, an American citizen or a permanent resident, at least for me at the time, you could get either like a 1 year or a 3 year extension, if you studied STEM or didn't study STEM. And the companies need, they typically ask, so they say, hey, hey, by the way, are you going to require sponsorship? And now I don't, but at the time I did. And so that was a question that often came up from recruiters. And I actually received the job offer. And then it was rescinded because they didn't, or there was a misunderstanding. And so the
Mm.
recruiter said, oh, sorry, I forgot to check. Or by the way, do you require sponsorship? And I said, I do. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, it's not going to work out. So I would say this is just something to be mindful of. I know international students so for me, I spoke with a lot of international students who were able to land jobs, and that gave me an idea of the types of companies that could accept international students. So
Mm.
I researched basically alums. I researched like people at different companies online using LinkedIn, and I tried to just figure out, oh, like if this person maybe is Egyptian and they are at that company, maybe if I reach
Right.
out, I can learn more about at least visa sponsorship related issues. So I would say do some research yourself. There's also a website, I think H1B salary or something. I can try to figure it out and send it, where basically companies that hire internationals in the US and sponsor them have to perhaps apply. But this website is a database of like H1B salaries. And so it's a signal that these companies are hiring people and sponsoring them for H1B. So that could be just a useful website. And I would encourage you also to research online, like how might I know what companies could hire for internationals? That was another thing. I know friends who were who really just wanted to study in the US. I was open to other countries as well. So my first job at Google was in Dublin, Ireland, because it was easier for me to one, land the job there and get the sponsorship. And so I was able to get my foot in the door at Google, live in Dublin, Ireland for a while. It was an amazing time for me. I learned a ton. I got to travel across Europe. And and then I came to the US later. So I think for people who might be open to other countries, I would say, what do you care about? and where would you potentially want to live? I applied, like I got an offer from booking.com in the Netherlands. And so I didn't take that one, but I would have loved to live in the Netherlands. So I would say I would say I try to be open. I think I try to figure out what's important for me. As a fresh grad, that meant maybe landing my first job, being in tech somehow, so I can figure out if that's the right career for me. And I was more flexible on the country. And so my first two job offers were from the Netherlands and Dublin, Ireland, and I ended up taking the Google offer.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's a related question actually. It's on the Q&A if you want to check it out. It's an anonymous question, and they're asking, what route can someone outside Europe or America take to build a career in a company based in those areas, based like in Europe or America? So you already shared some tips, like reach out to, just like summarizing, reach out to like maybe alumni. We don't know where you're from, but let's say you're from Egypt or Mexico. I'm just taking our countries, and you're interested in, maybe your interest is regional. So maybe you're interested in a company based in those regions you're mentioning. Reach out to people from your country, who might be working in those companies. Ask how they did it. And actually, I mean, in localized, most of the experts are from the regions you guys are. So you can search in the experts database in localized, if you're interested in a company in a specific, or search by your country and see if there's people who might have done similar career paths of what you're trying to do. Um, but I don't know if apart from that, you have any other, I mean, you can already answer this question, but is there anything you want to add to this?
I don't think so. I think that was my experience. I would say my husband's was very different. So he was also Egyptian. He came to the US, he did his master's, and then he got a job offer at Microsoft. And they were able to sponsor him. So it's like different for different people. And
Right.
yeah, I would say again, talk to different people, figure out the different path and see which one potentially could work for you.
Great. Um, okay, so there's a couple of more questions both in the Q&A and in the chat. If you haven't sent your questions, send them. So there's a question coming from Winston, and they're sharing that companies even ask entry-level applicants many times for like 1 year experience for internship roles. So they're saying, what can we do to give us an edge if we have no experience? Or maybe what type of things do you recommend putting on a CV, or how to highlight your skills if you don't have experience yet?
Yeah, it's just one of the things that sometimes frustrates me when companies do that. I would say, unfortunately, a lot of companies do this, and
Mm,
I felt similarly when I was younger. I'm like, what, I'm a student, I just graduated. What am I supposed to put?
right.
But I would say there are things that you can put. So for me, for example, I did some research internships, so I was able to put that on my resume. Um, it's not product management, but it's still something where I can say I've done research, and if I've done a good job in research with a professor, maybe I can. It's very transferable to the PM role. I was able to take different jobs at my university. And so, for example, I did some translation. I put that on my resume too. I did it because I, wanted to get some skills and maybe support myself. And at the same time, I was able to say, I was able to translate, X, Y, and Z and quantify the impact of my work and collaborate with people as I was doing some translations at the library. So even though it's like far away, I think there's a way to talk about your experience in a way that makes it feel very transferable because a lot of things are quite transferable. I did an internship at a startup when I was a student. So I was a student and I was doing this internship and it was part-time, but I was able to also put this on my resume. So for me, it was a question of what opportunities are there for me right now, whether it's maybe research that I could do with a professor or an internship that I maybe can get, whether it's online or in person, or even a job that's different that I can put on my resume so I can say I have had that experience, I've tried this thing, and I will have something to talk about throughout the interview. If you're taking classes, you can also put these classes. If it's a Coursera certificate or if it's a Udacity course, it demonstrates that you're curious and that you've taken at least one step to show that you're interested. So I've added like courses taken. Here are the courses I've taken because it shows, you know, how you think. So that's another thing. If there are freelancing websites online and you maybe have done a freelancing thing, maybe also put that on your resume. It's hard in the very beginning, but I would say just like find the smallest piece that you can do, highlight it, talk about it well, use it in a way to demonstrate that you have transferable skills, and that could be helpful. Yeah, I think these would be, and I would say don't feel apply even if they say they want 1 year of experience and you don't have 1 year of experience. Just apply. You never know. Like if you're
Yeah.
60% qualified, just apply.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And just adding a little bit to that, I just share in the chat 2 workshops. So every week we have a workshop where we help you on how to like improve your CV or like how to pass the interview. And those are more interactive than this. So you can actually like bring your specific case, bring your own CV, and we will help you live there. So in case you want to attend the next one about CV, I just share the link. In case you want to highlight these skills, if you don't have experience yet in the area, we can help you with that. Or you can watch the recording of a past workshop, which I also shared the recording. Great, so we have a lot of questions. Let's see, there's another one in the chat coming from Mahmoud. They're asking, what is the most common problems you face in your product management role and how do you face them?
Let me think about this for a second. I think I would say it goes back to the skills that you need. So asking myself questions around, am I identifying the right problems? Am I solving for the right thing? Am I using data in a meaningful way? Or sometimes people don't use any data and sometimes they drown in data. They're like spending so much time analyzing data and not making decisions. So am I spending my time in the right balanced way that gives me the highest return? So I'm doing enough research to be informed, but also moving fast enough. I think that's really important. Moving fast is so important. Versus, you know, if you're doing a PhD research, and I love that, and in another world I would do it, you have to really dive so deep. But for us, like we don't have complete decision information and we have to make decisions fast. So how do I balance this? How do I balance, you know, over communication and at the same time not overwhelming people with so much information? So I feel like for me, one of the hardest and most fun things about PM is this balance of how do I make sure it's a good enough experience, and how do I move fast and at the same time collect information? How do I use data but not drown in data? How do I communicate but not overwhelm people? I think that tension is when you're in. You also can never ever solve everything because there's so much you could do. Like so many pain points that your customers have, so many opportunities for the business, so many stakeholders. So I would say one of the hardest things for me was really figuring out what are the most important and impactful ways that I can be spending my time, and how can I say no to everything else. In real, like usually I'm a very helpful person. I want to solve like as much of the things that I can. And so for me, I try to learn how do I say no? How do I prioritize? And how can I tell people who might be facing an issue, sorry, we're not going to fix that because we don't have resources. And really the most important things are 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. Thank you for that. There's, well, I'm not sure it's strongly related, but I kind of related to it. There's another question in the Q&A function coming from Hiva, and they're asking, what is, I think this is really interesting, what is the non-glamorous part of product management that you have learned by being a product manager?
For me, QA, like making sure things, it's actually, I would say it's different for everyone. So for some people, it might be the research is the non-glamorous part. I love that part. The strategy, I love that part. For me, it's like once I've thought about something and once it's out, really just making sure, you know, it works, and like that little thing that's the tiny details. And some people love details. So it's for them, it might be a glamorous part. For me, it's one of the parts where I'm like, okay, I have to really, really pay attention and like not think big picture and deliver, but like there's a tiny thing that's not working. How do I make sure that's working? I think that's not very very glamorous. And also the Slack, like when you open your Slack and 50 different people, I don't 50 is an exaggeration, 20 different people are messaging you. Sometimes it's fun working with people, and sometimes you're like, whoa, like it's 80, I didn't even have my copy. Like how do I even, begin to respond to all of this? So that can sometimes feel overwhelming.
Thank you. Thank you for being like honest, and thank you for making that question as well. I think it's also good to know like it's not that it's the bad part, but just like both sides, like the glamorous thing and how Hiva mentioned it, like the non-glamorous thing, like maybe the daily struggles that you might face, like in any job.
Yeah, and when you
Um,
know, it's hard because sometimes things are broken and you just don't have the resources yet, right, to fix it, or it's not a priority. And so you're like the face of, we're not doing this, and then people are like, why are we not doing this? So I think there is it can be tricky saying no, because then you are the person responsible for delivering things on time, communicating. And if you say no, then having a lot of people talk to you and be like, why did you say no to this? Like, help us understand. So that can be a tricky part.
yeah, thank you. We have another question in the chat, coming from Lian, I think. So they're asking, well, they're sharing that they are finishing their masters in data science and they have experience developing AI and machine learning tech solutions. But they want to know if you have like any advice or tip for someone breaking from technical background to now PM. So how can they make this transition? If you have um, any tip.
I think this is a very, very common transition. I think many people have made that transition. Lenny's newsletter is one that I mention often. I think there is a great article he has about transitioning. But then I think it's a question of all the things I've listed as skills, what are the ones where you're stronger and how do you lean into this? So in your interview, how can you lean into the fact that you are technical, the fact that you're data driven, the projects you've done, and also demonstrate that you can do the other parts. So the communication, the writing, because I think you can imagine, an interviewer, if someone is really demonstrating a ton of skills in one area, but maybe not very strong. I'm not saying you're not, I'm just saying like they're going to be thinking about all these different pieces. So how can you amplify your superpowers and still demonstrate that you can do the other parts, the maybe the parts that your studies don't relate to as much, the communication, the writing, the collaboration. And these are again things that are learnable and can be demonstrated, but just making sure in the interview you balance both.
Amazing. I can't believe we're approaching the end of the session. We only have 2 minutes left. Time flew by. But I guess I would like to end the session. If you have like any last words, but I will also like to ask you, if you have like any in mind, like some of like the best or worst advice someone has given you for your professional career. If you have anything in mind that you remember that you would
Oh,
like to share.
yes, of course. I would say the best advice I got is reassurance that you can pivot, you can change. It's not you're not choosing for 50, you're just choosing the next job. Hopefully you will
True.
love it, hopefully you'll continue. But I think some students have this looming anxiety that, it's a lifelong decision. It's not, people change jobs, they start with something and then they learn and they can pivot. So don't feel like if you do, hopefully you're not feeling this existential. I felt that way. I was like, how do I plan for my life? And now I'm like, okay, what's my hypothesis about what I'm curious about next and how can I try this out? And it's just much less stressful mentally. So I would say that that's one advice. I think the other piece is when I was in university, there was a lot of talk about networking, and I didn't like, okay, I just went to all these career fairs and it was very stressful for me, and I didn't enjoy the networking piece. But I would say I learned that relationships really matter. And I would say relationships are two-way. So you're really not just, don't feel bad about reaching out to someone for a conversation. You can be as helpful to them as they could be to you. So if you're a young student, maybe you could share, like I would love to hear from young people's like experience about where they're from or what they studied in their university. So don't feel like you have nothing to offer as a younger person. You probably have a lot to offer, and I would say reach out to people, have conversations, because then you get to learn, even if they have no, immediate job for you. The relationship is way more important than any immediate thing, because
Right.
then you have a professional network. You can learn, you can grow, you can share, you can help people also. Like think about how can you mentor other people. So I would say I have built good relationships with like all my former colleagues, reached out to some of my professors in university. Like I try to stay in touch with people, and that's been really helpful. I also think there is a tendency when I was graduating out of college to focus on my weaknesses. Like I'm not good at this, and
Mhm.
I spend so much, and that's fine. But I would say I've learned over time that it could be okay to also focus on your strengths. Because if you're
Yeah.
good at something, double down on it. Like get better and get, make it your superpower versus I think like a weakness focused mindset, which again, you should take feedback and work on your weaknesses and everything. But I would say figure out your strength. Like if you're someone who loves data, how can you amplify that? If you're someone who's really good at talking to people, how can you amplify that?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for everyone for being here. Thank you for everyone who's gonna be watching the recording. There's a last question for you there, Nurhan, on the chat. But maybe we can send those after the session. They're asking in case you have like any book recommendation for improving PM skills or about PM. If you have some, we can send those after the session. We usually share those resources if the experts share anything extra on the event page. You guys will see like a chat or a questions like part. I will put the links there. So you can check those after the session. And you can always watch the recording if you want to like go back to like a specific question we ask or a specific thing the expert share. And just one last thing, sign up for more events. As Nurhan share and mention, talk to people. Localize is exactly for that. Reach out to both the students who might be in another country, who might be studying the same as you. Reach out to experts. Reach out to us. You can always send a message to an expert through the platform. Or if you're not exactly sure who to contact, if you have questions about your profile, about your CV, you can always message me on the platform. Just look out for my username, and I can direct you to the right person. So thank you so much again for being here, and thank you for everyone to for listening to this session. There's a lot of thank yous for you in the chat, Nurhan. And I guess we will see you in another localized event.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye, Michelle. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Have a great day.